a terrible car wreck, a 16-year-old boy who acted quickly, and the shocking realization that the mangled man he saved was somebody from his past. What happened after that night forced Steve to confront years of abuse, silence, and a choice most people never realize they're allowed to make: the choice to stop living as a victim.
Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't explain it? Like the person you love was slowly chipping away at your sense of self?
We've been there. Different marriages, but to the same man, with the same toxic pattern. But God was still working.
We're Lizzie and Dina, women of faith, survivors, and truth tellers.
Surviving toxic relationships is for any woman stuck in confusion, healing after betrayal, or searching for her voice again.
You are not crazy.
You are deeply loved. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of our show. Today, Lizzie and I have a very special guest. This is Steve Eichenblatt. And normally I would read his bio to you and introduce him, but Steve has this incredible story and he's written a book too. So instead of reading a bio, I'm going to let Steve go ahead and he's going to read from his book. Seriously, I think this is going to be a smash hit movie at some point. There's no way it wouldn't be.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. No, thanks very much. And thank you for letting me be on the podcast with you guys. As you know, I'm a lawyer in Orlando. I've been here for many years, practicing over 30 years. But I spent 10 years writing this book, and it's called Pretend They Are Dead. So I will go. Some accidents are no accident. Today is one of those paralyzing New Jersey summer days when the unrelenting humidity casts a blanket of warm, moist air over my entire 16-year-old body. I am on my way to work, riding my bike, trying to avoid the cars speeding along Colfax Road. No one wants to be outside today, but my job taking care of the Wayne Racquet Club courts leaves me no choice. New Jersey won't give me a driver's license for another year, so my green Schwinn Varsity 10-speed takes me everywhere, including work. I bought it with cash salvaged from my bar mitzvah money and hidden from Richard, who showed up one day and proclaimed himself my father. Now I'm stuck with his complicated, impossible to pronounce last name. My life used to be simple with Mom and my first dad, but those days are long gone. Richard doesn't pay attention to me unless it's to bark out orders or call me a loser. When he and Mom married, they told everyone how wonderful it was for their kids, his 4 and her 3, to be a united family, with 2 loving parents who love them equally, no matter the biology. We were dragged to temple events in strangers' houses so Mom and Richard could pretend we were brought together like one of God's miracles. They act like we are the Jewish Brady Bunch. But Mike Brady never screams at Carol or uses his belt on the kids. My clothes are soaked when I reach the gravel driveway at the club entrance. Here, no one's yelling at me and my parents aren't fighting. My overactive brain finally begins to shut up and the voices in my head quiet down. I begin to relax. Without warning, the furious screech of screaming car brakes and skidding tires disrupts my calm. The squealing yields to a horrifying crack, followed by the immediate crunch of a car slamming against a telephone pole just yards from where I stand. Metal collapses, glass explodes, and the pole splinters and begins tilting toward the ground the way a sinking ship lists in the water. It's a slow process, but there's no question the outcome will be catastrophic. The sound is one I will never forget. I drop my broom, run to the wrecked car, and the world disappears. My feet move too slowly, like lead, and the few seconds it takes me to sprint through the gate to the car feel like hours. My body feels disconnected from my mind. The smell of burning rubber mixed with gasoline fumes grows stronger and overwhelms me. Fluids pour out of the wreck. My heart pounds. A middle-aged man is inside the car, his head pressed against the shattered windshield, blood streaming down his face. One eye is a bloody pulp. He is motionless. He might be dead. My mind explodes. I turn away and run to the payphone 4 courts down to call the police. My hands shake. I dig into my pocket and grab the coins resting there, but drop one of my dimes. I dial 0 for the operator and hear a woman's voice asking if she can help me. But I'm not the one who needs help. I scream into the phone, babbling about a car crash, and then dashed back to the car, heart throbbing through my soaked shirt. The huffing and puffing sounds I hear of a person out of breath are coming from me. My chest heaves, but I feel nothing. People are gathering to help. Where did they all come from? I consider getting on my bike and riding away, but an irresistible force pulls me back toward the car. My brain is on high alert now. I fight the urge to leave. Sirens go louder, and soon the police and an ambulance pull between the gawkers parked along the roadside. The paramedics pull the man out of the car and sit him upright against its side as they assess his condition. He is breathing. I shouldn't stare, but I've never seen a real car crash before. Blood is everywhere. No one is talking. Watching the paramedics work, a strange sensation creeps through my body, like an energy force that cannot be measured by any scientific testing device. Instinctively, I feel the stare of the bloody man with a mutilated eye. I'm afraid to look because of what I might see, yet my head lifts to meet the forceful gaze of this crooked-faced victim. The police officer is bent over looking through the man's wallet. As he's loaded onto the ambulance, the officer pulls the driver's license out of the wallet and reads his name aloud. Alan Samuel Nessel, DVM. The officer looks around and raises his voice. Does anyone here know this man? Should I say something? Dizzy, my brain shuts down, and I see a flicker of light before the black and white television screen in my mind goes dark. Show's over. I walked a few steps to my bike, but don't remember mounting it or riding home. The sound of distant sirens fades from memory, and I don't even wonder if he survived. Now I'm in the garage and worried about Richard and his question if he finds out I witnessed the crash. I remember the adrenaline surges that forced my heart into overdrive. Will I get in trouble? No, I can't tell anyone about the crash. Never. I will just pretend it never happened. I keep hearing the police officer's voice, saying the injured man's name, and asking if anyone knows him. I can see his mangled eye staring into mine. Why is he looking at me? What does he want from me? Even though I refuse to answer the officer's question, the man is someone I knew. He used to be my father. This is not the reunion I'd hoped.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you have it. Everybody now knows kind of the beginning of this story. Tell us
Sure.
more. I mean, obviously, you're 16 years old, and here's your biological father in a car accident right where you work. What a crazy, crazy coincidence. Or was it a coincidence? Like, tell us about this.
Well, that's part of the book, and always, of course, the question. When you grow up in trauma, when you grow up with parents that are always fighting. I was 16 years old. I had no relationship with him. I was scared to death of my father who adopted me, and my biological father had left one day and never came back. And he was a veterinarian. He worked in the same town, and we weren't allowed to see him. And I never ever told anybody that I was there until I was 40 years old. So I kept that hidden for many, many, many years. And I think it's because I didn't know how to deal with it. Like, it was a hard thing to, it's one of those things you keep like hidden inside, and you just store it, because every day as I was growing up there was new challenges, and this is just another day in my life. So I started the book, because it's such a unique situation and unique thing to see, and because I had never told anybody. Not some of my brothers and sisters, they still don't know because they haven't read the book that I was there. They still don't know today. Uh, and later on, as I worked through the pages, I went through a lot of therapy, um, trying to figure out, from living in a house where you're always worried about what's going to happen. It just dawned on me that, until I am able to be vulnerable and let some of this stuff out, I had a lot of trouble with intimacy. And I went through a couple marriages, divorces, mainly because, like, my ex-wives would both tell you, man, Steve's a really good guy, but he's like disconnected in relationships. Like, um, and I never told them, like, I never, that of what I had been through. So nobody knew. I just kept it hidden. And so my journey starts with that.
So I know you had that really traumatic, abusive childhood. Did your father live? Did you end up ever finding him? Did anything come of that?
Sure. So, if you can imagine, and I know both of you guys have children, and I'm a father of 5 children. I lived in the same town with my biological father and never saw him, and he didn't see us. He just dropped us off one day, and that was it. He left and never came back. And lived within miles. This is a small town, Wayne, New Jersey. So after that, you just, I was 16, 17. I smoked a lot of pot. I listened to rock music. I was defiant, had terrible grades, never went to school. I just stayed away from my house as much as possible. Uh, my house was a war zone. Um, my parents, my grandparents took us on a weekend trip years before. And when we came back, my mother, we didn't know this, but she got married. And when we came back, my new father and my new brothers and sisters were in the driveway of my house, and the rules were laid down. This is your new father. This is your new brother. Here's the rules of the house. And if you don't like it, then tough. I was young, I was like 5 or 6 years old. Well, maybe I was 7 or 8. Like, I'm trying to remember exactly how old I was, but we didn't know my mother was even getting married. Nobody told us. She just did it. And then this man moves into the house who we didn't know, and he was not a good person, and screaming and yelling and a bully and physical. And he immediately laid down rules in the house. We weren't allowed to walk in the front door. We had to walk around to the back of the house. And if you didn't, there was a penalty to pay. We weren't allowed to sit on any of the furniture. So we sat on the floor. We weren't, and this is incredible. Like, we never had meals together. We weren't allowed in the kitchen when my parents were eating. So we ate separately, so there was a lot of chaos there, uh, and difficulties and fighting. And one of the things I learned too, as I was going through the process of writing, is, and you guys have been through divorce. It's anybody who's listening, what happens in a divorce, and that's from a child's perspective, is not only did my father leave, but I never saw my grandparents again. And I was really close to them. Like, they loved me. They loved me, or the aunts and uncles, or that side of the family. So it's not just him. He was no saint. I mean, what kind of man gives up your kids? And I've always said, and I was adopted by this other man, so my name changed. I've always said it would have been better to have been adopted like at birth than, how do you give up like your 5-year-old son, leave him, and then just let him be adopted by another man and never come back? So, years later, to answer your question, at some point I went to college and flunked out. Went and worked for the Miccosukee and Seminole Indians, then went to Israel. And while I was in Israel, I lived on a kibbutz, which, since October 7th, more people in this country are learning about what that is. But I lived on one in what's called the Jezreel Valley near Nazareth and Bethlehem. I wanted to join the IDF, and I began studying Hebrew. And there was a library on the kibbutz. And I started reading. I was always a big reader. That's kind of what saved my life. Even as a kid, I would hide in the closet, and I talk about in my book, and read. And while I was in Israel, I started reading like some self-help books that they just happened to have there. They had a library of books that were left over that people had been there. And, like Dale Carnegie stuff and Zig Ziglar and whatever was there, these old self-help books. It was way before the Tony Robbins era. And as I started reading them, it's like somehow this wake-up call, like, nobody's going to do this for me. So, self-help means, helping yourself. Like, if I don't get my tailbone in gear, I'm going nowhere. And it was easy to just spend my life as a victim. And some of my brothers and sisters, unfortunately, have never been able to move past the trauma because they all suffered, so I did wind up going back to school at Florida State, and then work my way to law school. Going back to your question, Dina. So there's a lot in my book. There's a lot of different things that happened along the way, and I can't give all of it away. But there's just some crazy stuff. Like it just, I mean, I think I read Angela's Ashes, incredible book. And I remember him writing in there that, miserable childhoods make for great writers because you have so much to write about. It's hard to understand unless you've been through, and you guys have both been through some stuff. And one of the things when I got back from Israel, I was probably 20 years old, is I wanted to find out whatever happened to my biological father. And so I decided to go up and knock on his door. And I'm really proud of myself. Like when I look back, because it took a lot of courage, as a 20-year-old to go confront him, and especially after everything I'd been through. And you read about these Dateline stories about these incredible connections and reunions, and everything's fantastic. And that's just not how it works. I mean, that's what they show on TV, but behind the scenes, we all know there's a lot more to it. And without getting into too much detail, when I knocked on his door, he didn't know who I was, he didn't recognize me. He eventually did, and he was a severely damaged person, not just from the car crash, but he had massive scars on his face, and but he at some point he'd gotten addicted to drugs, and I found out later that he'd been taking drugs for a long time, Valium, uppers, downers. He was a veterinarian and had access to things. So that's part of the story. Without there's so many different things that happened along the way. But what I found out that I had other brothers and sisters that he'd had that I didn't know about, that I was able to meet. When I met him, I still don't know why, but I never said anything to him about the accident. He's like a person with like Asperger's, like he definitely had a personality disorder even before the accident. And eventually he died in his 60s. I didn't really have a very close relationship with him after, because it was really hard to talk to him and connect with him. And he wasn't a well man, but I found out later when I went to his funeral that he had been a writer, not just a veterinarian, and he left thousands of pages. He journaled every day of his life between 1960 and 1990. He sat at a typewriter and wrote everything that happened to him all day, every day, for years. He wrote letters to his cousin, who actually is an Emmy Award-winning writer himself. And I was at his funeral. I decided to go to his funeral, and his cousin approached me and said, "Did you know your father was a writer?" And I had no idea. And it turns out he was like a very talented, skilled writer who'd had all this stuff published. And one of the stories that was published was it was called Hello Yellow, but it was the last night that he spent with us. And it was published in a magazine. There's a picture of a man with his back to his three kids. It was published in like the mid 70s or something. And I got it like after he died, so it was around 1990 or something. And it was a story about his last night with his kids. In it, there's a lot of details and things that happen in the story, but also he writes that he had been to a psychiatrist, and a psychiatrist told him the best thing you can do is just pretend they are dead. So that's where the title of the book comes from. And and that's where I got that from.
Wow. What a journey. And I'm sure that each time you were just like, this is hard. Was it like incredibly difficult to wrap your head around at times, or was it just like, huh?
It's a combination of both. Like there are some things that happened that I found out about my mother in the in the stuff that he would write. I mean, when I say he wrote about everything, I mean, he trying to like date women, and he would write about that. I mean, just he was an incredible writer, by the way, an incredible writer, and he won some national book awards or magazine awards, and I mean, he really was, but he was insane. So the writing is just insane, and so the second half of the book really does incorporate his writing. He wrote a lot about the car accident and about what happened leading up to the accident. And I'm going to leave that because that story is for people to buy my book. So I don't tell everything, but just the way the the way that all happened. Then one thing that I learned that was even crazier than the already crazy things is that after the car accident, he was unable to drive. He couldn't see. He had 250 stitches in his face, broken ribs, like just hospitalized for a long time. It's really a miracle that he didn't die. But what happened was after this crash happened, Richard, who was the father who adopted me, he was the president of the tennis club. He sent a letter to my biological father. His name was Alan Nessel. He sent a letter to him demanding that he pay for the damage that the pole caused when it fell on the tennis court. So he was threatening to sue him. And so, which told me, wait a second. So they knew, so Richard and my mother knew that my biological father had been in this horrible car crash. Never said anything to me about it. But my biological father, wrote about this. He decided to get one of his employees, like his nurse. She drove him to the hardware store one night because he couldn't drive, and he got his initials, ASN, Alan Samuel Nessel. He bought them at the hardware store, and they went out to the telephone pole, the new pole that they'd been put up, and he insisted on her nailing them, his initials, into the pole. And then they left. And I mean, that it's like, that's crazy, right? Like, what is that? And he called it his Alan S. Nessel Memorial Pole. He wrote about doing that, how important that was to him. And you know he didn't call us. He went there, and he nailed those into the pole. And I've actually spoken to the nurse that worked for him as part of my book. I called some of his former employees and everything else, and she said he is absolutely true. It was really important for him to do that, like to take control of the situation. I mean, that's how desperate. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how you evaluate that, but it's just crazy. So that's just part of it.
So, Steve, with you going through this level of trauma as a kid, and I mean, really, truly, like the trauma for you is just layer upon layer upon layer. Like it wasn't even just that you know, were adopted by an abusive father and then, treated like garbage, but you have the layer of you guys, all you kids were just treated like you were more of a burden, and you couldn't even eat with your parents. You had to sit on the floor. You couldn't sit on the furniture. Like, I mean, that's something that you do for a pet that is just too hairy, and you just don't want your couch to be a mess, or you don't want them to not potty train. And so they live outside. Like, those are things that you do for your pets. This is awful. And there's so many layers. But then, of course, finding out about your biological father and then that accident. And then, of course, just your whole life of feeling like your father left you and never came back. And like you said, even the whole, your grandparents, you lost a whole family unit. And then your mom clearly didn't protect you or do anything about that. So tell us, for people that are listening to this that have been through tremendous trauma, and it could be in their own childhood, or it could even be trauma that they had as an adult, with a bad relationship or with any number of things that could have happened to them. How did you overcome? How did you come out of that? I mean, clearly you end up having a very successful career as a trial lawyer, and you have a family of your own and children. And what did you do, or what are some things that could help people that are out there, some
Sure.
tools that can help them know how to overcome their own trauma and maybe even loss of identity?
Sure. Well, I made the decision not to spend my life as a victim because I was a victim, and because if you don't make that decision to call it went from victim to victory, however you want to phrase it. But at some point, I made a decision in my brain: I'm not going to sit and wallow in this. And part of it is that voice, frankly, in my head from my adoptive father telling me I would never make anything of myself. So I had to prove him wrong. Like there's those voices in your head. If you listen to the ones that motivate you, not the ones that say, "Oh, you can't do this," "Oh, feel sorry for yourself," and all that. It was that recognition that the only way that I was going to get past this was to take it upon myself and do the work myself that I needed to do to get out of it. I talk to my kids about this all the time. We all have those voices in our head. You don't have to listen to all of them. There's a lot of negativity. It's just human nature. So I made the decision, and really, some of those self-help stuff, just simple things, help me. Like really, keep your eye on the ball. Somebody said, "Steve, just keep your eye on the ball." That's what I like, and it made sense because I always played sports growing up, and any sport you play, whether it's golf or baseball or tennis, you got to keep your eye on the ball. And everybody, the other thing, as far as helping people get through it, is everybody, any house you walk into, there are problems, no matter how people present themselves. There are issues. Some are harder or worse than others, but everybody has them. And it's just part of the complicated life we're all living right now. So it's just push yourself forward, set a goal, and you know, uh, and force yourself to to reach it. Like as a lawyer, I represent a lot of children as a guardian ad litem. I volunteer, been doing it for 30 years, and a guardian ad litem represents the children in court, that are being taken away maybe by the state. Maybe they're born from drugs, or their parents are physically abusive and all those things. I mean, it's unbelievable, like the things that you see. And I decided I wanted to help those kids. But you get parents that come in, especially some of the wealthier ones, and they're so focused on themselves and their hatred for their spouse, they forget about their kids. They forget their kids are their collateral damage, and those kids are in the middle, and they hear everything that's happening. If you don't think your kids, especially young kids, don't know what's going on, they know everything. Some people just hate each other and they can't get past it. But if you have kids and you're being that selfish, that you put your kids in the middle, you're ruining them. Really, if you have kids, you owe it to them to keep your eye on the ball. And the other thing too, one thing that's happened in my life with my ex-wife, and I think this is sort of a miracle, really. But we did not have a good relationship for many of the years, just fighting over. We never went to court, and she, to her credit, anytime we were in public with the kids, she was always very, very nice, appropriate. There wasn't, because I coached little league teams where I would be told, "Listen, so and so can't be near her husband. There's a restraining order," or whatever it was. So I mean, you need to put that stuff aside, and even if it's an act for your kids, because they're watching you. And so that I always appreciated, even when I hated her, because there were times that I hated her and she hated me, and that happens. But and I certainly wasn't perfect, but but we eventually started realizing, both of us, that, and for the kids, that we needed to try to be civil, talk more. And we're not friends per se. And this is the miracle of it. So I've been divorced twice. My wife now was my first girlfriend. This is the romance part of my book. So my book's not just negative. There's a whole romance part, because I reconnected with her, and the whole thing, and I adopted her son. But my ex-wife, she recognized, she met the son that I adopted. Because my other kids, I try to get them all together. They're adults now, but I try to keep them together as much as possible, do things together. And my ex really liked the kid and decided, I think Steve's new wife is actually all right. She's been an independent woman. She worked for the federal government for 25 years. And so we all got together, because my daughter is a writer, and she actually had a movie premiere down here that she wrote in Orlando. Now we have a text group called Modern Family, and both of my ex-wives are on it with my kids, and because I have kids from 3 different mothers, we have a modern family. So if you can set that as a goal, put your kids first. Don't let those horrible voices in your head keep you down. You can run marathons. You can write a book. You set the goal. Don't be the person who says, oh, I want to do this. Just freaking do it.
I like that. That is perfect. A wrap up. I know that your story will definitely resonate. Definitely. What a journey. And I know both Dean and I just wish you nothing but the best. We appreciate you sharing everything with our listeners. And everyone, we will have everything linked below. If you want to reach out to him, his book, whatever, highly recommend it for
I'll
sure.
help anybody who wants to just bounce stuff off me. I help people all the time. I know more about family law than family lawyers because people, having gone through the 2 divorces, I'm like the consultant. Call Steve, he won't charge you, and he'll give you practical advice.
Good.
That book title, Pretend They Are Dead, is just by itself, it's just riveting. So yeah, you guys get your copy and you get to answer all the questions that we didn't have time to answer today on the show. And I know I've looked at some of them. I've done some research on his book, and there's some really interesting sidebar pieces that go along with this story. So you'll want to pick it up.
Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. And Dina, I want to hear from you after you read it and get your thoughts and your review, of course.
Of course. Absolutely. We'd love to.
And you too, Lizzie.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. You guys are great. You really are. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Steve Eichenblatt's story reminds us that trauma does not define us, but the stories that we tell ourselves about it can. Whether it's a single moment, a painful childhood, or a truth you've carried quietly for years, healing often begins when we stop pretending it didn't happen. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is only the beginning, and growth and healing is still possible. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time.